guys hear me?
No.
Not that that's usually a problem in my life, but
Turn it on.
Wouldn't it? You just needed it closer to your face.
what about now?
Yep.
Okay. Oh, I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ. I am recovering from drug and alcohol addiction, codependency, grief, and the most recent one that I finally admitted to myself was a hypocritical spirit, and my name is Tricia.
Hi, Tricia.
Some of you have heard my testimony once before, so this is a kind of more of an updated version, but I'll give you the basic rundown to start. I was born June 22nd, 1968 in Anaheim, California, to my mom and dad, Jess and Peggy. My parents divorced when I was 5 years old, and contact with my dad was sporadic at best for the next few years. Lack of contact and a relationship with my dad left me feeling abandoned, unwanted, and unloved by him, a feeling that lasted for decades after that. My parents both remarried, my dad when I was 9, my mom when I was 10, and through those marriages I gained 2 sisters and a brother. My step-parents were both good people who loved me, treated me like I was their own child. But for some reason, I was extremely jealous of my stepmom and my sisters, and the majority of that was because they had relationships with my dad and I didn't. And unfortunately, it would be decades before I knew the truth about what my sisters endured growing up.
Sorry.
I garnered a lot of unwanted attention while I was growing up, including that of my stepbrother, for my physical appearance. That included being verbally and physically stalked, harassed, assaulted by my peers. And despite that, fear and shame of being blamed for or being told that it was my fault kept me from saying anything to my parents throughout the rest of my childhood into my adulthood. Despite all of that, I was desperate for friendships, especially with girls. I didn't have any clue what a real friendship with a girl looked like. Not that I didn't have friends, but I still never felt like I was their BFF, if you know what I mean. Lost my track. Oh, I did everything to try and fit in, to be accepted and wanted. But because I had absolutely no clue who I was, that led me to a cycle of destructive relationships, not just intimate relationships, but both of my previous marriages were included in that as well. During my first marriage, after a dental procedure, I was prescribed painkillers, and when I took double the dose, suddenly every bit of fear, insecurity, anger, all of that was gone. And from that moment, it was a race the rest of my life to seek out that relief for any reason. Anytime I was uncomfortable, scared, angry, I did anything I could to attempt to numb those feelings away rather than face them. Unfortunately, during this time, and this went on for 25 years, my husband, our kids, and our grandkids became unwilling victims to my addictions and my self-destructive behaviors. Fast forward a few years, my final downward spiral began on November 10th, 2019, when I got the call that after a 5-year fight with a critical lung disease, my youngest son, Christopher, had made the decision to stop all life support. He had been on a ventilator for about 3 months at that point. Because he was in California, I knew that there would be no way that I could get to him before he would drop his last breath. Every ounce of guilt, shame, and regret that I had over not being the mom that he and his brother had both wanted and deserved was absolutely overwhelming, and I spent the next 11 months literally trying to drown that out. I had all but given up on my life. The relationship between me and my husband was almost non-existent, and when we did have contact, it was tense, to say the least. It didn't matter what he said, what he did, what other family and friends said or did to try to get me to see how desperately I needed help. I had given up. I just didn't care at that point. My husband and I separated, and for a good portion of that time, I ended up living with my oldest son and his family in Arizona, And trust me when I say, people tell you that doing a geographic doesn't help, it doesn't help. All the struggles are still there. So here I was, 52 years old and living with my son. Although I knew I was wanted and needed by my son and his family, my life was still far from ideal. I still had all the same struggles. One of those I realized was codependency. And a lot of the time that I was there with him, I was still trying to make up for all the time, all the years that I wasn't the mom that he deserved. After about 4 months of living there, Dale and I were in the process of divorcing. The papers had been drawn up. Through text messages, I think we spoke on the phone one time, the whole time I was down there. And I was sitting out on the front porch at my son's house one day, and I literally heard God ask me, "Are you done yet?" And I couldn't tell you why I heard that. I was just sitting outside smoking a cigarette, but I knew when he asked me that, I knew I was done. I was done running. I was done hiding from myself, from God, and from everything that I had been fighting to not feel all my life.
Amen.
A few minutes later, I remember reaching out to my husband in tears and having to admit to him that I'd made a huge mistake, that I didn't want a divorce. I wanted to know if our marriage still had a chance. Deathly afraid he was going to say no, that it was too late. Thankfully, he didn't say no. And we spent the next few weeks talking about our relationship, our marriage, and my need for treatment. But for me, despite knowing that he wanted me to get treatment, for me, it wasn't, it was more than that. It was the desire for me and my life to be completely different than it had ever been.
Yes, hallelujah.
I had tried treatment before. It didn't work because I didn't do it for the right reasons. After those few weeks of talking, getting myself enrolled in treatment starting in Arizona, and then arranging to continue up here, I came home from Arizona on our 10-year wedding anniversary, and a year later we renewed our vows. Psalm 40, verses 1 and 2 state, "I waited patiently for the Lord. He turned to me and heard my cry. He lifted me out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and mire. He set my feet on a rock and gave me a firm place to stand." And that was the beginning of that. The beginning of the end, or the end of the beginning, I don't know which way you want to say it. What it's like now, over the last 3 years, I just celebrated 3 years in recovery on October 19th.
Yeah.
Something I've never accomplished before. In these 3 years, I've learned to trust others, to not push them away, especially when I needed them the most. And some of you know this, some of you don't. When I needed people the most was last year when we lost our 4-year-old grandson, Braxton. Because of my family here and my husband, I knew I wasn't grieving his death alone. And I made it through it. Days are still hard. We still miss him. But I've learned that it's okay to say that. It's okay to miss him. It's still okay to cry.
Yes.
I've also learned to be honest with myself, with God, and with others, even when it might be painful or embarrassing. 3-step studies in, I've learned a lot about some of the embarrassing things that I've done, behaviors. But having a sponsor, accountability partners, and those step studies, and growing my relationship with Christ, I've learned that I no longer have to carry the shame and the guilt that I shouldered for so many years.
Amen.
While acknowledging my character defects hasn't always been easy, I know that it's a necessary part of an authentic recovery process. You heard me in my introduction identify that one of those, the most recent one, was admitting I had a hypocritical spirit. I spent years pointing out everybody else's mistakes. For those of you who know me well, you know that most of those happened on Facebook. Even the company I worked for knew my Facebook history before they ever met me. But despite pointing out everybody else's mistakes, trying to shame them, I was struggling with the same things they were, but I was hiding it from everybody. I remember my husband telling me one night that the things that I said on Facebook would come back to bite me one day, and he wasn't wrong. Today, I do everything I can to keep that in mind, in all my actions and my words, most especially on social media. But one of the most important things that I've learned is that I can still help hold somebody accountable, but do it in private and do it in love.
Yes.
When they say that you attract more bees with honey than you do with vinegar, it's really true. Today I have the absolute privilege of working along some of the same people that I shamed on Facebook or attempted to shame, and others I'm being given the opportunity to walk alongside as they begin their recovery journey. In both of those cases, I've been given the just absolute blessing of starting to be able to make my amends to them. It's still a fearful thing because you never know what somebody's going to say if they say anything when you offer amends. But every single one of them has shown me what grace looks like in person.
Jesus, thank you.
2 Corinthians 12, 8 through 10. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. But he said, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong.
Amen.
Those verses right there, the first time I heard them and they clicked with me, I realized that I had been really, really silent about my recovery. Unless you were part of the CR family or my blood family, nobody knew I was in recovery. And God was telling me that it was time for me to speak up.
Yeah.
Because if I can change, anybody can change. If God can change my heart, he can change your heart.
Jesus.
Hebrews 12, 11, and 14. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and a peace for those who have been trained by it. Therefore, strengthen your feeble arms and weak knees. Make level paths for your feet, so that the lame may not be disabled, but rather healed. Make every effort to live in peace with everyone and to be holy. Without holiness, no one will see the Lord. It's my job as a Christian, as a person in recovery, to model what good recovery looks like, what Christ-like recovery looks like. And if I can't, then I'm failing at my job. And I don't just mean the job that pays the bills. My job here. I take it very seriously now, and I've finally gotten to the point where I don't care who knows my past, who knows my secrets, because I'm not that person anymore.
Amen.
I don't live in the past. And it's pretty amazing when I remind myself of that and remind myself of how I used to judge others for their past, no matter how long ago it was. So it's been a blessing. I'll close out with this. No matter what you're going through, whether it's celebrating your recovered birthday or mourning the loss of your child, lean on your forever family. We were not meant to do recovery alone. Reach out. And if you haven't gotten into a step study and you think you might be ready, talk to somebody about it. My recovery would not be where it is without having done step studies and digging into where the hurt came from, where the trauma came from, and learning to work through it and get past it. That's all.
Hey, thank you.